All right, welcome back to the Deep Life, and today we are joined by Terry Tucker for what is sure to be an inspiring conversation on living an uncommon and extraordinary life. Terry is no stranger to stressful and challenging situations. He was a Division I athlete, then went on to a career in law enforcement where he was a SWAT team hostage negotiator, and he is also a survivor of a long battle with cancer that took his foot and then his leg. But through all of this, he has maintained an incredibly positive outlook, and he has become an expert on mindset and self-improvement. Terry, welcome to the Deep Life Podcast.
Dan Elise, I'm really looking forward to talking with you. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We can't wait to dive deep with you today, Terry, and thank you so much for accompanying us.
Yeah, we're really excited to dive into this conversation, but to start, I feel like I could barely scratch the surface on your story there. I want to give people a little bit of an introduction, but could you please share a little bit of your story and background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall. And as you mentioned, I played Division I college basketball at the Citadel, despite having three knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the marketing department at the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37 years old, made the major pivot in my life and got into law enforcement. And part of what I did was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business. I coached girls' high school basketball, which is probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But I guess after that, for the last 12 years, I've been battling a rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That's cool.
So you've done some things.
I'm just old, that's all.
It comes with the territory.
It does.
But wise nonetheless, I'm sure, as we'll dive into here. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just was kind of lean into, what you're doing now is sort of like, you've become a bit of a speaker and you've written some books. And it seems to me that you've got a great grasp on sort of mindset and, like you said, living an extraordinary and uncommon life. At what point did you kind of start to kind of lean into this direction and realize that maybe some of your experiences have pushed you there, but you needed to actively do it?
I think it was something I learned from my father. As horrible as it was to watch him die, I had the opportunity to have a lot of really good conversations with him as he was dying. And one thing I learned was, at least from his perspective, you needed a purpose. You needed something to do. You had to make meaning out of your misery, so to speak. And he loved real estate. He was in real estate his entire life. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my turn in the barrel, I need to have that purpose, something to do. And, if you look at my life, so much of what I've done has been physical. I was a college basketball player. I was a law enforcement. I was on the SWAT team. And now I don't have a leg and I'm in a wheelchair. And so, to balance those things, I think when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important. And that's really what I feel I've been doing for the last 12 plus years now. I was supposed to be dead 10 years ago. That's literally what they told me. And I thought, well, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 12 years now.
Wow. I feel like that's so inspirational and something that, is going to touch many. So let's kind of dive into this, because I have found, and from personal experience with family members who have been diagnosed with cancer or some sort of very hard disease, that there is a time limit put. Typically, many people are then just sunk in this heavy, heavy mindset and feeling of this is it. And a hopelessness almost consumes them. But it seems like you had kind of perhaps maybe a different approach, or maybe you were dwelling in that for a little bit and maybe figured it wasn't going to serve you, whatever it maybe. I want to leave this open to you. But it's such an interesting perspective, especially in the realm of a paradigm shift. Like a medical professional is telling you, you're not going to live, but something maybe inside of you deep down, maybe, I don't know, call it intuition, your soul, wisdom, whatever it may be, is saying no. We're not going to take that as truth right now. Let's see what can happen. So I'd love for you to kind of just unpack what that mental maybe stability or mental control that you were able to handle meant for you.
Sure. So I don't want your audience to think that, you know, I'm some Superman. You're looking at me now. There's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. But I absolutely went through all the stages initially that we would associate with grief. You know, first it was anger, you know, not anger, denial. You know, I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. I watched my father die. So I've done everything, you know, I've had physical exams, I've done tests, I've done whatever I needed to do. And then I got into the anger phase where, you know, I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right. And then our daughter was in high school at the time I was diagnosed. And so there was sort of a bargaining with God, you know, just, hey, let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I absolutely got down. I got depressed. I felt sorry for myself. And then I just got to a point where this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. You know, I don't like the cards that I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards to the best of my ability, whatever that looks like. And I love the old Stoic philosophy. They used to talk about what was called memento mori. You know, remember death. Remember that you're going to die. And we don't like to do that, especially in the West. You know, it's like we don't talk about death. We're never going to die. Everything's going to be great. But when you accept the fact that you are going to die, or the fact that you are dead and you're just whatever time you got left is a gift, your paradigm does change. You look at things differently. And I go back to when I was in high school. I had 3 knee surgeries, as I mentioned. The second one, they took out 25 pieces of my bone. The doctor said, you're never going to play basketball again. You may not walk normally again. And I remember thinking, how do you know? You know, you have no idea what I'm capable of doing. And I think, and I've seen so many people, all these years of cancer, where a doctor will tell somebody something, they take it at face value, and you know what? You're going to be dead in 2 years. And 2 years almost to the day they die. But what a doctor doesn't know is that you want to see your son graduate from high school, or you want to walk your daughter down the aisle, or you want to hold your grandkids. And I'll tell you, your brain, your mind is so powerful that if you focus on those things, it's amazing how much your body will just come along for the ride. And that's really kind of the way I think I've lived my life for the last 12 years.
I love that. I think it's so beautiful. I know that you started saying that you're not, you know, Superman, you don't have a cape or anything. But I mean, in another person's eyes, you very well could be, because this motivation saying that, you know, you're an average person, nothing. But I think that that's the message that's so poignant that comes across, because it hits so many of us like, oh, okay, if Terry can do it, if this person can do it, whomever, I can do it too. Because like you're saying, there wasn't maybe no extraordinary circumstances. It was just that perspective shift. And what I think was sticking out when you were talking about, you know, perhaps a doctor, like I said, anyone in a lab coat that is diagnosed, like you have 2 years to live, that's it. When you resist that fear of death, what you resist persists. That's almost an all-consuming mindset. And of course, your body's going to deteriorate, because your cells listen. I don't know how. I'm not a physicist. I can't tell, but I know that your body follows suit to what you're thinking. So if you're thinking, I'm going to die, like you said, in 2 years, boom, boom. So I think that even the simplistic nature of what you're explaining, that you just wanted to walk your daughter down the aisle, you wanted to hold grandkids, you wanted to have this life. It's beautiful and simplistic, but profound.
Yeah, it is. It's a different way of looking at things. And you're right. You know, a lot of times we see somebody in a white coat with a bunch of initials after their name, and it's like they're the expert. And I've seen people do it. I've seen people turn their entire life over to that person and say, okay, whatever you do or whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And I am sort of like that, but I'm also engaged. I mean, I want my life to be shaped by the decisions that I made, not the ones that I didn't or that somebody else made for me. So I'm constantly involved in my own health. You know, why are we doing this? And I've always said to my doctor, if you can explain to me in English, in layman's terms, not in medicalese, why you want to do this and what you're hoping to get, there's a good chance I'll go along with you. But if you can't explain it to me, because I've got to put it in my head and I've got to use it for my benefit in that way. So help me to understand why we're doing it. And I am lucky because I am at a research hospital. I'm at a university hospital. So I have access, to a pharmacist who is an oncology specialist. Now, I'll just give you a quick example. I read an article about doctors in Portugal that were using DHA, which is a fatty fish oil. They were experimenting with it. And unbeknownst to them, they found out that it acts like a Trojan horse in cancer cells. Pick it up, it kills them. So immediately I go to the pharmacist and say, I want to use this. Is it okay with you? She said, well, hang on, let me check and see what the deal is. And now she came back to me and said, we don't want you to do this. And the reason is you had a blood clot in your lung in 2017. You're on a blood thinner. DHA thins your blood even more. You would be more susceptible to bleeding. I'm like, okay, I can understand that. It makes perfect sense. I won't do it. So it's that kind of engagement, I think, with our doctors and our medical professionals, at least for me, that helps me to be part of this journey, not just somebody who, come on, I'll pull you along and tell you what to do.
Yeah, I love that. And you said something amazing earlier where you said, like, the doctor didn't know what you were capable of. And I think that that's true for all. Like, we're all capable of probably so much more than we even realize. And you just had sort of the determination, and maybe like at the time it was just luck, and you were lucky enough to be stupid enough to be determined to not listen to the doctor. And whatever
you
it
figured
is,
me
like,
out. I'm stupid. I got that. You're absolutely right.
But there's also, I think it was in Joe Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo, where they talk about misdiagnoses, where somebody would go in, maybe the doctor reads the wrong screen by accident because they're in a hurry, and they come in and they give them the prognosis, you're going to be dead in 6 weeks or whatever it is, and they just accept it, and they are. And then they realize later, oh, wait a minute, that was our bad. You didn't really have that disease. It was the guy down the hall. So I think, like, our mindset is so unbelievably powerful, and it's like the things that we choose to accept and the things that we choose not to accept and choose to go our own way. And I think it seems like in your case, you've gone your own way in a lot of these situations and found what worked for you. It seems so powerful.
I have, and actually I'm reading a book right now called The Expectation Effect. And I think science is learning more that our brains are not, it's not black and white. For example, if the three of us saw, an armed robbery, I might say the guy had a red shirt on. Dan, you might say he had a blue shirt on. Elise, you might say he had a green shirt on. It was like, well, we saw the same thing, but what they're coming to understand is that our brains are predictors. So they predict what they think is going to happen, or it predicts what's going to happen, and it puts it out there. Now, that may not be true. As I said, we may see the person had 3 different colored shirts on. Obviously, they only have 1 colored shirt on. So why does that happen? Because our brain predicts things. And the book is great about talking about the placebo effect and the nocebo effect of, here, I'm going to give you this sugar pill. It's going to work for you. Or you know what? If you eat this highly caloric, whatever, piece of cheese, that you're going to lose weight. Well, if somebody in a white coat with a bunch of initials after the name tells you that, there's a very good chance you're going to believe them. It's like, you know what? I'm going to eat all this fatty cheese and I'm going to lose weight. And you do. But the opposite is true too. If they tell you you're going to die and it's the guy down the hall whose report they're looking at, you very well, your brain may do that as well. Your brain may say, well, I'm going to be dead in 6 weeks. There's nothing I can do about it. So, the brain is an amazing organ, 3-pound ball of fat that's sitting up there that does all this stuff for us, but it also predicts what's going to happen. It doesn't necessarily know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the placebo is like, I think we have a wrong interpretation of it in a lot of ways, where people think of like, oh, like that's just the placebo effect. It doesn't really work. But what it's really doing is pointing to the fact that it's not the thing that does it. it's our mindset that creates the changes. And if we believe a pill, for example, is going to heal us, it will, but it's not the pill, it's that we then heal ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this guy leads me into like one of the 4 truths that I've heard you mention, that we need to control our mind so that our mind doesn't control us, which is exactly, the same as the placebo. Like, how do we do that? This might be a big one, but how do we actually learn to control our mind and not allow it to control us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Cleveland Clinic estimates that on any given day, we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind, most of which we don't pay any attention to. And they say roughly 95% of those thoughts are old thoughts from previous days. So on any given day, we have roughly about 3,500 new thoughts that kind of pass through our mind. And our mind operates at a speed of about 1,000 words a minute. Now, I'm old enough that I took typing in high school. So like 40 words a minute on a typewriter, I got an A. 1,000 words a minute, I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't even imagine that. The problem is that our mind can still only hold one thought at a time. And I think the problem with most of us, and I am absolutely guilty of this many times in my life, is that we think with our fears and our insecurities instead of using our minds. And I know I've done that. I know I've wanted to start something and you kind of pull back and you're like, ooh, I don't know, maybe I'm not smart enough to do that. Or, maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And I always, especially if I talk to groups of young people, I always tell them, there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you. Go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things that you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do, but then it's going to be too late to do them. And I'll give you another quick story. So, well, I'm going to give you 2 more if you don't mind.
No, please.
Love it.
When I was growing up, I grew up in Chicago, so Indiana was right next to us. Bobby Knight was the basketball coach at Indiana University. And Knight had a quote that went like this: mental is to physical as 4 is to 1. So here was this great coach teaching elite athletes to use their bodies to be great basketball players on the court. But what he was really saying with that quote is that your mind or your mindset is 4 times more important to your overall success than anything that your physical body's going to do. And the last story I'll tell you, my college where I went to school is a military college, the Citadel. And one year we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. And Stockdale had been a prisoner of war during the Vietnam conflict. He'd actually won our nation's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, for his actions while he was locked up. And I remember being in an event with him. Obviously, he was the president of college. I didn't spend a lot of time with him. But somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, and that abuse? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said, the people who didn't survive were the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And the next thing he said really surprised me. He said, the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said, these were the people that thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be rescued. And he said, those people died of a broken heart. He said, the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control, which according to Stockdale was basically the thoughts in our mind and the breathing in our lungs. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy, and controlled it. And so this is a long-winded answer to your question, Dan, but how do you control your mind? I always tell people, if things are bothering you, just take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bugging you about whatever it is. Just write everything down on a piece of paper, and then go through and cross out everything that you don't have control over, and then focus on those things you can control. I think where we kind of get out over our skis is we get to a point where we're trying to control all these things that we absolutely cannot control.
No, that was a beautiful answer. Yeah. Please, that's why we have the guest episodes. We want you to share and tell these stories. Stories are so relatable, and both of those were incredible. And I think that gosh, it resonates and hits home for, I think, both Dan and I, because mindset has been such a big part of our lives. And like you said so beautifully, most people, I want to speak for myself, I typically live in the narrative or mental conversation from my past experiences that are shaping who I am today, or I'm projecting that fear onto a future that hasn't happened yet. And it is a very much a never-ending cycle. I'm getting better at this, as it's kind of like the observer. How can I become the observer of these thoughts? And it can feel kind of daunting, because that number that you've thrown out, and we've actually talked about on the podcast, 60, 70,000 thoughts a day. Holy crap. Like, how do you observe them? I'm not talking about every single one of them, but the ones that are persistent. Those are the ones that you want to pay attention to, because those are the ones that are typically, like I said, from the past, a trauma, an event, a memory that's shaping who you are today and projecting a future that hasn't happened. So it's like bringing yourself into that present moment, almost as you beautifully said, those prisoners of war, they literally cannot do anything but sit with themselves. And as difficult as that is, we talk about this in any meditation practice, it can be hard to do that. But it is so liberating to actually sit with yourself and those thoughts, whether you're a prisoner of war in meditation, because you can begin to understand this conversation that is in all of our minds, and can at least practice being able to control or shift the narrative to what is maybe more beneficial in whatever scenario that may be for the person.
I agree. And there's a great book called Do Hard Things. It's written by a man by the name of Steve Magnus. And Magnus used to be the head track and field coach at the University of Minnesota. And he puts a story in there about a research project that was done at the University of Minnesota with undergraduates. And they were asked to sit in a room for like 15 or 20 minutes. So it wasn't like, 3 days or anything like that, with no devices, with nothing, no iPads, no earbuds, anything. And the only thing that was in the room was a table and a chair. And on the table was a buzzer. And if you press the buzzer, you received an electric shock. 68% of the men and 25% of the women shocked themselves, including one guy who shocked himself on average every 5 seconds. And the results of that were kind of like what you just said, Elise. I'm not comfortable with myself. I'm not comfortable in my own skin with my own thoughts. I'm comfortable being on a device and, oh, somebody said something. Oh, they like my hair today, or they like my shirt today. That's how I get my affirmation. And when I read that, I thought, what, that's crazy. I'm old, so I don't do a lot of, hanging out on devices and stuff. But I thought, what, I'm going to spend 10 minutes every day just deconstructing, unplugging. You know what? Nothing. I'm going to sit with my thoughts. I'm not going to meditate. I'm not going to pray. I'm just going to let my thoughts go wherever they go, so that I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I didn't think I needed it, but it was something I wanted to do. And I think younger people, especially, that are so tied to their devices, if they would take that test, just spend 10 minutes. You waste 10 minutes every day. We all do. Just take that 10 minutes. Just sit with your own thoughts. Be comfortable in your own skin.
Yes.
Yes.
I absolutely agree. Amazing advice. And I think that's such an interesting experiment.
It is. I've never heard it. That's crazy.
It's like people they'd rather experience pain than the silence and being with their own thoughts. And that might sound crazy, but then I think when we all look at our own life, we also tend to sit and dwell on negative things and go over that same story that over and over that hurts, and we just don't like it. But there is this sort of like attraction to pain because it's familiar. Even though we don't necessarily like it, we'd rather be in that uncomfortable, familiar feeling than risk something new and something different. And I think that ends up expressing as our life for so many of us, where we find ourselves, like Elise mentioned earlier, like being in that like Groundhog Day life that's constantly just the same thing over and over, and it's miserable and we hate it, but we don't do anything about it because it's also familiar.
It is. And so many people, I think the vast majority of people, they never get outside that and think, what does it mean to be great? What does it mean to do something amazing in your life? There's a there's an entrepreneur out in California by the name of Ed Milet. He's pretty famous.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
We don't know him, but we know of his work. He's
exactly.
Yeah.
He talks about the 4 types of people in the world. And he said the first group are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people that you will encounter in your life. And then the second group he talks about are the motivated, where it's kind of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. It's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people to have a really successful life. And then the third group he talks about are the inspirational people, where the word inspiration comes from 2 words, in spirit. So if you are inspirational, you are moving people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I'm giving a talk and depending on the group, I'll tell that story and I'll be like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody ever says, yeah, that's me. I'm totally unmotivated in my life. But if you believe Milet, and I'm old enough to be like, yeah, most people, they don't care. They've never thought about what it means to be great, and they always say the richest real estate in the world are our cemeteries, because they're rich in books never written, businesses never started, relationships never pursued. So don't be in that cemetery being one of those people.
Wow, I've never heard that.
Yeah,
Have
I
you?
like that, no.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love kind of analogies and metaphors like that hit home. Yes. Wow. Yeah.
What to kind of like thinking of those 4 stages of people, if somebody does find themselves to be either unmotivated, if they're willing to accept that, or maybe they're just motivated, how do you think we take the steps to move up in toward being inspirational or even aspirational?
I think part of it is, motivation is a big word, gets thrown around a lot. And I just don't think it's enough. And what I try to suggest to people is this: think of your life as sort of a 3-legged stool. That if you have all 3 of these things, there's a very good chance you can be successful in life. The first one is motivation, and that's got to come from you. Nobody can motivate you to do anything. You've got to say, I really want to do this. I really want to put in the time. The second thing I think you need is discipline. The decision that I am going to, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it every day, whatever that looks like. And then the third thing you need are good habits. So if you think of that as a 3-legged stool, if you're highly motivated and you're disciplined, but you have terrible habits, not a really good chance you're probably going to be successful. If you got great habits and you're motivated, but you're not disciplined to implement those, again, probably not going to happen. So you need all 3 of those things, I think, to take it to the next level. Okay, I'm motivated. And I think you got to be true to yourself. You got to find misery in your uncomfortableness and things like that, and find that purpose, find that reason that I'm here. And what I suggest for people is, what are you good at? What are your gifts and talents? If you told me to go be an accountant, I would fail miserably. I'm not really great at math. But so many people do that. I mean, it's like, hey, dad was an accountant, so you're going to be an accountant. Well, I don't really want to be an accountant. I want to be, a doctor or whatever you want, a ditch digger, whatever you do, be the best at it. Be the absolute best that you can possibly be. So I don't know. I mean, I think you got to know yourself. You got to know your purpose. And if you live that purpose, I think you can get to a point. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not all of a sudden going to be aspirational where everybody wants to be like you. You're going to have to make a lot of mistakes along the way.
And those mistakes turn into beautiful lessons.
Yes.
Because, a mistake is just something that you're learning in the direction of whatever journey you're taking, whether it be career, relationship, family, work-wise. I think it's so beautiful, because I feel like the underlying theme that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes is just the sheer potential we hold as humans that is very untapped. And obviously that starts with the mindset, but where can we marry this mindset, but with our heart, like really having that heart-brain coherence to allow it to unfold before us? Because so many people, like you said, can be motivated, can be determined, but then in other areas, maybe possibly fall short. I've been there, I've done it. But that underlying driver of almost asking the question, who could I be in the absence of possibly these limiting thoughts or limiting beliefs? Or who could I be if I did leave this job that I don't truly love, or perhaps a relationship that's no longer serving anybody? And it can be hard, as Dan said, we kind of just like the comfortable nature of what our life presents us. And so it can be challenging to take these steps to really let go, perhaps, of what's no longer serving us.
I would absolutely agree. And
yeah, okay, I was gonna say.
I have seen so many people in my life, and you both probably have also, that feel that they're born empty. And that when they get out of school and they get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill their empty self up. I've got to get the best education and make the most money, drive the nicest car, live in the nicest house, have the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful, however you define that term, already inside of us. We just need to use it, pull it out first, use it for our benefit. So instead of looking at your life in terms of what I can get, we should be looking at our lives in terms of what I can give. So our purpose should not be to fill ourselves up. Our purpose should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the benefit of ourselves, but also for the benefit of our families, of our communities, of our friends, of our countries. And when you make that switch, it's not what I can get, and we want stuff, because you're never going to be filled. There's always going to be one more thing that if I have that, then I'll be happy. But when you turn your life into what I can give to other people, it's amazing when you make that paradigm shift, just how your whole outlook on life is something that is positive and happy, and I'm helping people. It's not, I got to get the latest thing, and I don't have the money, or I don't have the experience yet, but I'll get it and then I'll be happy. No, you won't. You'll never be happy. And the last thing I'll say about this is life is not linear. We do not, start here and then we just keep going. Life is more like I start, I plateau, I get worse, I get better, I plateau, I get better, I get worse. That's how life is. And these people that think that I'm going to start here and I'm just going to be great until I'm amazing, that's not life. That's not the way life works in anything.
Yeah, it would kind of be boring, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said there, because you were saying that this potential of human beings, I think it's so innate within us, and typically within this material world that we have outside of us. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with, wanting a nice house and cars, of course, but like you're saying so beautifully, Terry, most people are doing it, I think, for the wrong reasons. And I truly, from my own experience, and I'd actually like to perhaps get your opinion on this, just either from yourself or talking to other people, coaching other people, your speaking engagements. What I realized is a very deep discovery, because I was someone who came from low self-worth, always had a very scarce lack mentality, and what I realized was I truly didn't love myself. And so what I was trying to amass was love and acceptance from other people. I would just buy clothes, or I would, binge eat to fulfill these empty needs that I was really not truly giving myself. Like I said, didn't fully love myself. I'm learning that still, and I've gotten, so much better. But would you say that that's like a common theme, people not truly like embracing and accepting who they are?
Yes. I think we somehow think that, there are these people that are at the top of the mountain, or that are on the pedestals and stuff like that. And we put them there, and that, I don't compare to those people at all. And I'll give you a story. I had one of my nurses who takes care of me. I'm still being treated for tumors in my lungs. She's about 25 years old when this story happened. She was already a nurse, but she was learning how to do things on the unit where I get treated. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me, and she came in and she said, "Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know if I can tell it to you." And I didn't know how to respond to that. It's like, well, I hope you decide you want to tell me this story. So for the next couple of hours, she's in and out. And then finally she comes in, she sits down, she's like, "All right, here's the story." She said, "When I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I had talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see what you go through. I have a terrible reaction to the medicine that I'm given. And she said, then I went back in your chart and I read everything that had happened to you during your cancer journey. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had had a positive impact on her. For your audience, I mean, for the two of you, if you ever think that way, I guarantee you there are people out there, some you know, some you may not know, that are watching how you handle the adversity in your life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think your life doesn't matter. It does. You may not know who it matters to, but I can promise you, your life is having an impact on somebody else that's watching you.
It's such a
Oh
powerful
my
story.
gosh, that gave me chills from head to toe. How beautiful that is.
Yeah, this is all like I really believe that kind of in this game that we're playing here in life, I think that we all are like a unique puzzle piece. And that when we actually kind of embrace and love who we are and express as the true puzzle piece that we are, then we kind of fit in the world. And that each one of us fits in perfectly and we create this beautiful image. But when instead we try to copy other people's pieces, or we just kind of judge our piece, oh, it's not the right shape, and we try to chip away pieces of it and try to decide what it's supposed to be, then we rob the rest of the puzzle of this perfect piece that kind of fits in there and plays a role. And I think that speaks exactly to what you're saying, where it's like we don't realize that maybe the other pieces that connect to ours are benefiting from us by us just being ourselves. And it doesn't need to be this, grand expression of doing something. It's really just showing up as yourself can be service to the world.
Absolutely. And that's what people don't understand. I've got to be great. Why can't you just be great at being you? I mean, making a lot of money. I mean, let's face it, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember any of us were here. And I'm going to tell you another nurse story. That's all I got. Nurse, cop, or sports stories. That's all I got. So one of my nurses who cares for me used to be a hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't know about hospice, it's people who take care of others at the end of their life. And she recommended a book for me to read, and it was called Imagine Heaven. And it's about people who had near-death experiences. And a lot of good things in it. But one of the big things I took away from the book was no matter who the person who had the near-death experience saw during their experience, whether it was Jesus or an angel or a saint or a friend or a relative, almost all of them got asked one question. And that question was, how do you treat my people? And I think that, if you go back to the Bible, if you're Christian, I am, I'm not trying to put religion out here, but if you go back to the Bible, Jesus was asked, what's the most important commandment? Love your God above all others. And the second is just like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that second question goes to that second commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. How are you treating other people? If COVID taught us anything, we need each other. We're not good in isolation. COVID, you saw divorce rates go up, domestic violence rates go up, alcoholism rates go up, drug abuse rates go up. We're not good separately. We are so much better together. And so, when you hear that, how do you treat my people? How do we care for each other? How do we connect with each other? As I said a minute ago, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember we're here. But today, what I want to be remembered for are the connections, the relationships that I have with other people in my life.
Such a powerful message, so beautiful. We're all one. I mean, regardless of race, color, ethnicity, whatever it is, of course, and to embrace each other's uniqueness to get those perspectives. It's kind of like I was talking, it'd be really boring if we were all the same. So it's such a beautiful message, and having that, faith and connection and, treating others. It's just beautiful. I was like, well, I kind of, oh, were you going to say something? No. I kind of want to jump a little bit actually into your book.
Sure.
Because I'd love to understand a little bit more about it. You've got these 10 principles leading to your uncommon and extraordinary life. And what does that mean to you? And obviously we don't have to go through the 10 principles, but I'm sure it ties into this conversation.
Yeah, I never expected to write a book, never wanted to write a book. There's kind of the old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me to write a book or anything like that. But I honestly believe what God did was put enough people in my path that started to make the same suggestion. You should write a book. You should write a book. So I think I'm smart enough when that happens that I need to pay attention to it. So sustainable excellence was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And after dinner, I remember saying to her, I'm really excited that you're living close and I get to watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. Then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media from college. And he said, what do you think are the most important things that I need to know to not just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him the sort of cliches that we all know. So I took some time and I was writing some notes and kind of had these 10 ideas, these 10 thoughts, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Wow. That's quite incredible.
What would you call like an extraordinary life?
I guess I would say finding your purpose, living it, and being of service to others.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful life if you really look at it. Like, we can get caught up in all the trappings and all the things, but like what you said, it comes down to the way that you affect other people and the way that you're able to be of service.
And I think it's important too. Like, I think I meant to mention this before, because I feel I've had many different kind of careers. I mean, I'm only 37, but I feel like I had a midlife crisis at 30. I was doing things that I really didn't. But I again, feel grateful, right? The mistakes I turned into, what I'm trying to find as my purpose and passion. And I was talking to a girlfriend about it too, is going through a really big transition in her career and just going back and forth, like almost hearing her feel so defeated of not knowing what she wanted to do. And I want to just share this for people. Like, it's okay if you don't want to know what to do. So, as you so beautifully said, this player of yours said, like, what's my purpose? You don't necessarily need to know. It's okay to go out and try some different things. Be different, do different. And then if it's something that you love, great. Maybe that is a pursuit that you can journey down that path. Or if it's something that you really don't like, boom, huge win, that at least you can cross that off and you can say that you did it to do it. But I think most people kind of get stuck in this monotonous lifestyle or change that they're too afraid to take these. But having that drive is so, I think, important, but something that can be hard to grapple with. Do you have, any tips that you give people? Like, how do I try to find this? Or if I've got no direction, do I go right? Do I go left? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially when we're younger, we set these arbitrary goals. It's like, okay, by the time I'm 25, I want to be making $100,000 a year. And by the time I'm 32, I want to be married and have a family. And when those arbitrary goals don't happen on your time frame, you get down, you get depressed, you think, oh, there's something wrong with me, I'm not doing it. I think if you look at life a little bit differently, and this is what I suggest, look at life in terms of decades. So in your 20s, do everything. Get out there, make mistakes, mess up, not for the sake of making mistakes, but as we talked about earlier, for the sake of learning. What did I learn from making that mistake? But in your 20s, do everything. I mean, you're dumb, you're stupid, you don't know what you're doing anyway. So just get out there and just do things you find interesting. And then in your 30s, find those 2 or 3 things that you find so incredibly special that you want to dig into them further. And then in your 40s, when you're more established, when your prefrontal cortex is, everything's come together for you, you've got more experience, you've got more knowledge, find that one thing and dig into it. And then in your 50s and your 60s, you can reap the rewards, you can reap the benefits from what you did in your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s. And I think if you look at life in terms of decades and you don't set those arbitrary, oh my God, I've got to be here by the time I'm 25. Why? Why do you have to be there? Why do you set that? That's an imaginary goal. It doesn't mean anything. You just put it there. Don't look at life that way. I mean, you're 25 years old. Okay, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. You got the rest of the decade. You got 5 more years to just make mistakes and get out there and do things. So I think when people look at their lives that way and not try, because we look at our lives as, we remember the highs and the lows. Remember the birthdays, the graduation, the weddings, and we remember the deaths and the layoffs and, the COVID pandemic. But where life is won and lost is right in the middle, is the day in, day out things that we do, the habits that we have. I don't even set goals anymore. I just look at my processes. Am I doing things that are going to lead me to where I want to be? So I don't set New Year's resolutions. I don't set goals. Are my processes good? If they're not, I need to make them. I need to make good processes, or I need to take the ones that I've got and retool them and make them better so they work for me.
I really like that.
I do. I'm really a big fan of focusing on the process and just getting the little things kind of dialed in, and that way, it's like you're not reliant on the outcome.
Right.
You're reliant on the growth that you can experience day to day and the experiences that you can have, which is, I think, so much more fulfilling. Because a lot of times, like you were saying before, where you sort of make a list and you have the things you can control and the things you can't. You can control the process. You can't control the outcome. The outcome isn't mine. Like, I create something and put it out into the world. That's for the world to deal with. If they like it, they like it. But if I'm proud of what I put out there, that's a win.
It is. And let me say this also. It's more important who you work with and for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want you to be successful. Hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together. And I promise you, 1, you'll probably get to the top of the mountain, and 2, you'll just be a whole lot happier.
Ooh,
Yeah, I really like that.
I really like that too.
It's funny, like that you bring. It's funny to me that you bring this up, because I was having a really similar thought recently about sort of goals and kind of looking at my life and be like, there's things that I had wanted to accomplish that I haven't accomplished yet, and I was kind of just realizing, well, why would I judge myself now based on if I accomplished that or not, when it's just like a version of me that didn't know any better, right? Just created, like you said, like just arbitrary goals or imaginary goals. Like, if I had known then what I know now, I would have set a different goal, or I would have gone about it in a different way. So there's no reason for me to judge who I am now based on, just sort of the ideas of a different version of me that didn't know any better.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what Elise said before about, we like to, think we have it all figured out. It's okay not to understand. It's okay not to figure it out. I mean, I went to college and majored in business because my dad told me to. Yeah, honestly, I had no idea. I mean, especially when we're young, you're 17, 18, you get out of high school, I got the world figured out. I don't know squat at that age, and I didn't know what to major in. Dad said major in business. Okay, Dad said major in business. I'm majoring in business.
I did the exact same thing. I was like, I want to make money. You make money at businesses. I'll be a business major. Like, what am I going to do? Then I became a coach.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I had a Division I football player who connected with me on LinkedIn, and he reached out and said, "Hey, can we have a phone call?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." He said, I'm interested in this sales job, and I'm going to be meeting with the sales manager. Can I talk to you about what questions he's going to ask? I said, "Sure." I said, "But let me ask you one question first." I said, "If there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you're supposed to do, what is that one thing right now?" And without missing a beat, he said, "I'd be a high school football coach." I said, "Then why are we talking about a sales job?" And he said, "Because I want to make money." And I told him, I said, when you don't know your values, you will always default to wanting more money. That'll be your default. I mean, if I make money, I'll be happy. But you don't know your values. So we ended up talking about the sales job. And I said, look, when you finish with that interview, call me back. I'd like to hear what, how that goes and what happened with that. You think I've ever heard from him? He never called me back.
Interesting.
I mean, I think I planted a seed in him that's like, you know what? You'd be happier being a football coach. You may not make as much money, but you'd be so much happier doing that than I'm going to get in sales. I'm going to make all this money. I'm going to be happy. You got to figure that out. I can't tell you that. So,
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
And I just want to add, I do think that when we do kind of follow our purpose and live that life, things have a way of working out. And, we might be worried about the money going into it, but that's not a reason to not do it.
Right.
Because maybe those things will sort themselves out.
Right.
And I think that this is like how beautiful the universe works. Universe, God, whatever you want to call it. That person probably was destined to call you because you planted that seed, which is what he needed to hear at that moment to fulfill his purpose, his path, whatever that be. And sometimes we require others to reflect back to us what we're not necessarily seeing. It's kind of I actually don't know if we had hit record when we had started, but it's getting to know who we are, right? Deep down, who are we and what do we truly want? And values is a big one, because if we don't know who we are, if we don't know what we value, if we're just going about our lives because of what either our parents told us, school, society, movies, TV shows, all of these influences around us, our community, telling us who to be, then we're going to create that life very unconsciously. But to know who we truly are, to work on our values or to understand them, then we're able to really question, are these thoughts mine? Do I want to do this in my life? Do I want to be this person just to make money? Or how can I be fulfilled? And then you begin to create the life that you truly want to step into, that is filled with joy and excitement and fulfillment and abundance that's just going to naturally come in relationships and money and health, whatever it may be.
It is. And, it's interesting. We talk about values and character and things like that. I had an interview. I interviewed with a company after I left Wendy's, but before I went to work for the hospital. And it was a packaged goods company. I was talking to the senior vice president of marketing. It's a 90-minute interview. We spent the entire time talking about my life, basically from birth until I graduated from college. And when the interview was over, I said to him, I'll be honest with you, this is the strangest interview I've ever had. You didn't ask me one question about marketing or business or my philosophy or anything like that. I said, do you mind if I ask you why you wanted to know about basically growing up? He said, yeah. He said, I want to hire people of good character. He said, I got plenty of people out there that'll tell me whether you're a good fit for the team or not. Incidentally, I was not offered the job. And he said, so I figure character is developed in the first 20 years of your life. And so that's why I asked you about growing up in your family, what your high school experience was, basketball, knee surgery, all that kind of stuff. He said, because I believe character is caught, not taught. You're not going to read a book and say, okay, I'm a person of great character. No, you're going to watch people. You're going to say, oh, I really like the way she handled that situation, or I don't think he handled that very well. And that's going to develop your character. So, where do you get your character in life? Mostly, or your value, mostly from your family and the people you hang around with. So hang around with good people.
Yes. Oh my God. I love that story. That's really inspirational. Cool. Well, gosh, Terry, we have I feel like covered so many topics here and very inspirational. Again, we thank you so much for being vulnerable, for sharing, for cultivating this really inspirational life. I know that you said that you're, an ordinary person, but you're pretty extraordinary in my eyes. And I'm really excited for the audience to listen to this. But we always want to open this space up to make sure if there is anything within your heart that perhaps we didn't touch upon that you want to either speak to or leave as a message.
Sure, I'll if you don't mind, tell you one more story, and it's another nurse story. So here we go. Now, one of my nurses asked me, what it was like to have my foot amputated and then have my leg amputated. And I said, well, it certainly hasn't been easy. I'm 6'8" tall. So learning to walk again, falling is not an option from this height. You get hurt. Yeah. I said, but what I've come to understand is that cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Dan. That's who you are, Elise. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time working on this body. You know, we eat right, we get enough rest, we exercise, we reduce stress. And I'm certainly not telling you not to do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know at some point in time, this body's going to die, it's going to decay, it's going to go away. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things are eternal. Those things live on. And I just don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should.
I mean,
Perfect way
just
to
what
end.
an epic way to end. That is the epitome of the deep life. And we thank you so much for sharing that wisdom and your knowledge. And like I said, your heartfelt inspiration with us and the audience here. Terry, where can we direct people if people would like to learn more about you, if people would like to, purchase your book or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, Sustainable Excellence is available anywhere you can get a book online, Amazon,
Perfect.
Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks. And then I have a website / blog called Motivational Check. I've got other recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. Please, if you just want to reach out, leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Amazing. And we'll make sure that that is in the show notes. Again, Terry, we are just heartwarmed that you joined us today on the show. So thank you again.
Well, thank you both for having me on. I enjoyed talking with you.